Good morning, traders. My name is Charles. This is the Pirate Traders live stream where we talk about the ES, the NQ, and the two-way auction process that it goes through intraday. All right, well, let's start with the basics. How am I feeling this morning? I am feeling neutral to bearish. My reason being, the market had a lot of momentum last week. We made this huge move to the upside, and it now looks to me like the market is rolling over with that momentum, and that is something that we call balance. So the move to the upside is something we call excess. That is when the market has momentum, and when that momentum runs out, we expect balance, right? We expect the market to go from excess to balance, balance to excess. So there's two different ways that the market can balance off the excess that it created last week. The first way is by using time. Time would basically mean the market makes a big move to the upside, and then it basically just moves sideways in a higher range, building up momentum to break higher. Okay? The other way is with price. Market can pull back down with price, basically giving the market a dip, an opportunity to buy at a lower level, and then that causes the market to turn around and head higher. Now, I'm not sure yet which of the two is happening. It could be balancing off the excess with time or price, which is why I am neutral to bearish. Okay? Also, it is worth mentioning, because we had the long weekend, I include Monday's trade as just part of the overnight trade. So this whole section here, which represents the entire weekend, I just see as one profile, and that's all just the overnight market. And if we look at what the overnight market did in that context, it just balanced, right? It just went sideways all weekend long. Where did it do it? In the lower end of Friday's range. So that, to me, again, is neutral to bearish to see. It's a sign we don't have the momentum to keep going higher just yet. Now, of course, we can build the momentum. You can always convince new buyers to buy. You can always convince shorts to cover. But for now, I feel neutral to bearish. Okay? So the next thing I'm looking at is, all right, well, if I'm feeling neutral to bearish, how would the market make whatever move it's going to make today? What's sort of the process that it would go through? Well, right now, we're opening right at Friday's fairest price to do business. Okay? Friday's point of control. So that tells me that we're probably going to go sideways for a little bit. We're probably going to just chop it up this morning. Chop it up. And so I'm expecting the market to go up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, maybe for hours. But it will eventually break out of that chop zone. And once it breaks out of that chop zone, we will look for further continuation one way or another. So for me, the lower end of that chop zone is basically this cumulative node of volume around 4,500, which was also the overnight low. Okay. And then this large node of volume from Friday, which was also the overnight high. That is pretty much the zone that I assume we're going to chop in. That even if it goes down, it could turn around and go back up. Even if it goes up, it can turn around and go back down. And it can just keep chopping until they either get above that overnight high and find new buyers up there, meaning it pushes above, comes back down, finds support. That support would tell me it's ready for further upside continuation. Or same thing down here, we could use yesterday's low if we wanted to have a earlier opportunity, or if we wanted to be more cautious, we could wait for the overnight low and essentially look for the market to push below there, get resistance, then look for continuation, push below there, get resistance, look for continuation. Okay? So I'm coming into the morning this morning, bigger picture, feeling neutral to bearish, but shorter term intraday, I'm looking for a chop zone. Will there just chop it up? A couple other things that are worth mentioning, obviously not based on the weather, but according to the Wall Street calendar, the summer is over. So people will be coming back to work. The long weekend is over. So there will be liquidity stepping into the market this week. And that liquidity could give us a bigger understanding of what's happening in the market. And then the last thing that's worth mentioning is we talked about balance and excess. We created a lot of excess last week, and there are two ways to balance off that excess. If I had to guess, if you were to put a gun to my head right now and be like, Charles, you got to tell me, are we going to balance it with time or are we going to balance it with price? My guess would be price. And the reason for that is two things. First off, we had a balance area that we broke out of. Okay? Almost always, when you break out of a balance area, you need to come back and back test that balance area high before you're ready to go higher. Not always, but most of the time. So that is one reason to assume we may need a pullback with price here on the ES. The other reason is the way the market got up here was it was built on all weakness. Just weakness and single prints and weakness. And all of that increases the odds that there is liquidity waiting down here below these weak levels. So if there's liquidity waiting down here, the market is likely to come down to find that business. So all in all, I'm feeling neutral to bearish. Let's see what the market gives us. Let the chop begin. We got 98 people hanging out, 24 likes. I would sure appreciate it if you could just give me a quick thumbs up to let the YouTube algorithm know that I'm awesome. So maybe it sends some new people our way. All right, well, while the ES is chopping it up, why don't we click over and take a look at the NQ. Okay, so the Nasdaq is in the same position as the ES is. We had a lot of excess. We've begun the process of rolling that over, which is a sign that we're going to get balance. Two ways to balance that off. If they're going to do it with price, with time, they need to reverse it pretty quick here. So they too are in a chop zone, but they are pushing down as we speak to test Friday's low. If they can't dip below there and then turn around and head back up, then they're likely to test the overnight low around 15,420. And if they get new selling down there, well, then it's a pullback with price, not time, and things get very bearish very quick. So the buyers need to step in here. We need to see excess, and we need to see taper. So far we've got it. We got taper on the low, which means more chop. But if they start to push down here and bring in volume, that's bearish. Let's see what happens. Chop it up. I'm looking at Bookmap here, and I'm zoomed way out. to get a kind of picture of where the liquidity is sitting. We've got about the same amount of liquidity above and below price right now. So that just further confirms chop for the first hour or so today. Good morning to David G, to Nap, Maya, Michael Z, New Culture, Peter, Pavel, 200 Dogs, Gino, Tim G. Happy Synthetic Monday. It does have a Monday feel to it, doesn't it? New Culture says, Charles, do you trade the first 15 minutes? Why or why not? So it all just depends. I have a purely discretionary way of trading, which basically means I just trade whenever I feel like it. There's no exact reason to get in a trade or not. I just ask myself two simple questions. What is the market doing? And how good of a job is it doing of that? So if in the first 15 minutes, I believe I know what the market is doing, and I'm confident that I'm right, that it is doing that, then sure, I'll get in a trade. Maybe there's a gap and I'm looking for a gap fill. Maybe there's a gap and I'm looking for a gap and go. Times like that, I absolutely will get in a trade. On a day like today, where we open in a chop zone, no way. A day like today, I just sit back, relax, I let them chop it up, then I look for opportunities. That's not to say you can't make money. You know what I mean? You could go ahead and go long in here, assuming that when they dip down, they're going to reverse and chop back up. You could go ahead and go short up here, assuming that once they get up there, they're going to turn around and chop back down. There would be nothing wrong with that. It's just I personally don't like to trade that way because I don't feel like I have any statistical understanding of for sure it's going to work, right? It would just be a guess. And I don't enter trades on guesses. I enter trades when I feel I have a statistical edge, meaning I'm certain above 60% that this is going to work. Right now, who knows? They could push down here and then the market crashes lower. They could push up here and the market shoots higher. Because I can't be sure, I must just wait for more information. So, for example, we've got these weak references we left behind last week. We got a poor low, which it looks like we're about to test right now. We got a weak reference just below it from the day before. So those are likely to get repaired. Boop, boop, meaning the market will pass through those levels. But one of two things could happen there. That could cause new sellers to join the market, right? People could start to see we're below Friday's low. They see that we've made lower highs and lower lows on the daily, boom, right there. And they start to get bearish. And they're like, oh no, short, short, short. And then the market just liquidates lower from there. The other alternative is maybe that's where the liquidity is waiting. Maybe the same buyers that were stepping in the overnight in here are waiting once again. So as soon as we repair those weak references, we turn around and head back up. Without certainty of which two of those will play out, it's not a reason to get into a long trade. Again, that's just the way I approach the market. There is no right or wrong way. So, of course, seeing that we just made lower lows, that is bearish to see. Increasing the odds slightly that the market is going to go lower today. But it doesn't mean they can't chop it up for a while first. Chopping broccoli. Jay says, thank God it's Tuesday. Casino is open. Welcome to Arjit. Andreas. Deborah. Rachel, thank you. Malang, nor auto trading in the house. Mr. Ree, and the Haas. Well, welcome, welcome. Only half of you have hit that thumbs up. I guess the other half of you have no love for the pirate. Good morning, Siku and Al. Welcome. So I know what you guys are thinking. You're saying to yourself, Charles, explain to me how the price from the open till now has been going down, but the ticks have been going up. What's with that? Well, that shows us that most of this momentum down so far today has just been sellers from the overnight, buyers from the overnight exiting their trades, right? People that went long in here were hoping when the market opened this morning it would head higher. When it didn't, they're just getting squeezed out of their long trades. That's what's pulling price down. But with the ticks moving up, we know that there are people buying the underlying shares, further increasing the odds of chop. Chopping broccoli. As always, when the market is in a chop zone, we are watching the halfback, which is currently at 45.13 to become resistance. If they cannot get back up through that halfback, it increases the odds. They're heading back down to test the support at the lows. If they pass right through it, well, then more chop. So we should get a signal here of the momentum. Peter says, we have chop now because there is news at 7. I assume you're on West Coast time. Okay, that resistance is holding. So that increases the odds. We're heading back down to test the lows. We left behind a weak reference at 45.06. So the first order of business is for the market to repair that weak reference, meaning poke a few ticks below. Once it does, it can do the same thing it did when it repaired the poor low. It can turn around and head right back up, or we can get new selling. New selling would be bearish to head down and test the overnight low. Let's see what happens. David says, if the NQ could not hold 15,420, that means it's bearish. Well, I'm already neutral to bearish. 15 to 420. Yeah, absolutely. If that becomes resistance, especially. So it could poke down there real quick, right? Just to test that overnight low. But if it turns around and comes right back up, we're going to get more chop. However, if they push down there below that overnight low and you get selling down there, you get new business down there, yes, that's very bearish. Because then you start to look at needing to balance off the excess with price, not with time, right? So right now, we don't know. They could just want to go sideways for a few days. But if they get below there and they get new selling, you start looking at those single prints they left behind. You start looking at weak references. You start looking at this large volume node down here around 15,100. And those start to become the targets to the downside. Okay, there's the repair of the weak low. So once again, does the market just reverse back up to the halfback? Or does the market stay down here and bring in new business down here? Which would be more bearish to see. Anders says, do you ignore Monday's profile due to the holiday? Correct. Yes, I do. I just combined all of that as one big overnight range in my mind. So this is the overnight low, this is the overnight high, and it's all just one profile. Or should I say, one chop zone. All right, new selling at Friday's low, bearish to see. All right, I'm officially bearish to test that overnight low and monitor for continuation lower from there. I remain bearish as long as we're below 45.14. The idea is the halfback should hold as resistance here. If it cannot, then I'm just wrong and we need more chop. But if I'm right, we should test that overnight low. That should bring in more panic selling. A little bit of liquidation. That liquidation starts to bring in new sellers, FOMO sellers, and we look for continuation. We look to see how far they can push it. Andrew says, is there such a thing where resistance at the volume point of control means anything? Yeah. The volume point of control will be the largest volume node from whatever day. And that always, a large volume node is likely support or resistance, right? A large volume node is just where business was done before. If they're going to do business again, they'll probably do it where they did it before. Super Drive Guy says, is it the Russell dragging the ES and the NQ lower? I don't look at the Russell. I just trade the market I trade based on what it's doing. So I trade the ES. I'm not worried about what any other market is doing in relation to the ES. I'm purely focused on what the ES is doing. If it's the NQ pulling it down, if it's the Russell, if it's oil, if it's, Amazon stock, I don't care. It's just, what is it doing? Is it pushing to new levels and bringing in new sellers? Great. I think it's going to keep going. Don't need to know why. Just need to understand what's happening. Got a little bot shenanigan zone here. They're trying to get as many people long and as many people short as they can right on Friday's low, so they can squeeze them. It will also be very interesting to see what happens to this liquidity at 4,500. There's probably some spoofing happening here. So they're building it up to try to pull the market down. But what if right before we get there it disappears? Then the market will turn around and come back up. So we'll keep an eye on that. Also, 1 minute till that volatility. Here we go. Boo-da, boo-da, boo-doo. Okay, market just created a poor low. That is bearish to see. We often get a push away from a poor low first, but then they come back to repair it. Kevin says, do you think the large orders act like magnets? Right now, there are 450 contracts at 4,500. I absolutely do. I think that's why they put it there. They put this one up here and this one down here so that they could tug on the market back and forth while they chop. Like I said, if I had to guess, you're going to put a gun to my head. What I think will happen is we'll come down right to 45.01. And when we get there, you'll see a bunch of this disappear. Poof, just gone. And then it'll turn around, come right back up, squeezing all the sellers that are piling on here at Friday's low, back up into resistance. Then it comes down again. As soon as we get in resistance, that liquidity will pop back up there once again, and then we come for it. Oh, the games they play. Oh, the games they play. David says poor low is 1 or 2 ticks. It's less than 2 ticks. So if there's 2 letters that you can see below the previous low, that's a good low. That's good excess. If it's less than 2 letters, it's weak or poor. In this case, it's poor. And yeah. Just like we created a poor low on Friday and we came back for it this morning, we just created a poor low this morning and we'll come back for it. First, we got to squeeze some of these short-term scalping sellers. Once we stop them out, then we come back for it. Minton says, why does it push away from a poor low, then come back? The short answer is to create liquidity. Okay? So they create the low. They push away a little bit, literally what they just did. And what's happening right now at this moment, right? Traders are thinking, double bottom. Look at this. We got support. And they're buying, right? They're buying the market. Well, where are they putting their stops if they're buying the market right now? They're putting their stops below They're putting their stops down here. So they're creating momentum up because they're buying, but they're also creating liquidity below because they have their stops. So the market pushes away until it gets to wherever those short-term traders are going to take profits, right? They start to take profits. Well, now that momentum up is gone, right? Everyone that was going to buy that double bottom on the 1 minute candle or whatever they're looking at, they're done. And then where does the market go? Right back to take out the ones who didn't take profits. Anyone who's still in that trade who left their stop down there, they become the target. All the market is doing all day, every day is just looking for liquidity. Where can it get people to put their orders so it can go fill those orders? And by people, I include machines and bots. Okay, even poorer. Ooh, now those scalpers are like, I gotta get long. Look at that low. But where are they putting their stops? JK says, is a poor low because of the amount of contracts traded or the time spent? It's time. However, we do also pay attention to contracts. So if there's less than 100 on the ES, if there's less than 100 contracts, we call that a low volume low, which functions very similar. It just doesn't have the push away effect. A poor low will first push the market away, looking for resistance, then come back. Whereas if you have a low volume low, it could just immediately repair it right then and there or whatever. Anything could really happen. It's just a little magnet. Okay, that wasn't real sellers at Friday's low. That was a bot. So I think we get some more chop coming here. Oh, yes. Shenanigans. Scott says the NQ is rejecting the opening price. Let's take a look. NQ is still chop zone, but poor low. So they're looking for resistance to come back down. I would say that resistance is going to be 15,495. All right, here we go. Testing the resistance at the halfback on the ES. 45.11. Can they hold it? Skewball in the house. Frito in the house. Sup, dudes and dudettes. Duderinos. The dude abides. John George. Arr. All right, there is the repair of the poor low. For those of you that are just joining the program, I am bearish to test the overnight low. The reason is because we opened inside a chop zone. We then got today's low below yesterday's low, below Friday's low. That gave us lower highs and lower lows on the daily. And I assumed that would bring in new sellers. Those new sellers should at the very least test that overnight low. And then we will monitor for continuation lower from there. Do we get new selling below that overnight low to take us down to the next week reference at 44.94? Or do we just look below that overnight low and fail, pulling right back up? Pulling back up would lead to more chop, more sideways grind, new sellers, continuation lower. Let's see what happens. And so far, it's been nothing but bot chop. We also have the value area, which is this blue box that you see right here. That is now overlapping to lower from yesterday's range, which is bearish to see. And it is at the lower end of today's range, which increases the odds we need more further downside continuation. So we can already see the spoofing happening at 4,500. As the market was coming down, they were making it darker and darker. Then they start to lighten it up to reverse the market back up. I suspect it'll happen again at 45.01. Design knob in the house. Pappy! You may get it today. It might be a Pappy day. Let's see what the NQ is doing. Ooh, NQ just still chopping. David A says no liquidity in Bookmap today. No, that's just because I'm so zoomed in. If I were to zoom out, you'd see there's liquidity. Yeah. It's just I have it super, super zoomed in, so it's just showing us what's on screen right now. I'm literally focused on two things. This iceberg and this liquidity of 4,500. Once we tap this and it disappears, does this start to get dark red again? Oh, man, they really want to fill those orders. They really want to get short. $75 contracts. David says maybe they're selling resistance. Yeah, I mean, of course, we don't know. Maybe they're taking profits, but that's what it looks like to me. Looks like somebody that trades with 75 contracts wanted to sell Friday's low. Scalping strategy in the house. Good morning to you. Got 134 people hanging out, only 86 likes. If you have not hit that thumbs up yet, I sure would appreciate it. All right, moment of truth. If the bears are going to remain in control, they should smack the market down here below 45.16. We will, of course, see that when the ticks get smacked back down at the zero line. Pavel says, pour low, pour high on the NQ. Well, that's chop. That's more chop. Let's give the ES a chance here. Scooball 666 stops taken on Bookmap. Dun 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 dun. Just watch that 4,500 number. $200. They got me to a tick. Oh, no. Well, don't feel too bad. There's some trader who lost 300 contracts to a tick. Man, the NQ is impossible to read here. So the B period completely engulfed the A period. That's a sign of chop. You're also still inside the overnight range. That's a sign of chop. You got a poor low, but you also got a look below and fail of yesterday's range. So NQ is tricky, but ES remains bearish. As long as we can hold this resistance. I'm watching the tick chart to tell the tale. Whilst it is not technically trending lower, I'd be comfortable basically thinking of this like a trend on the ES, not the NQ, that if they can stay, they can come up and they can get within a letter, within one TPO of that B period high, and still have momentum to test the overnight low. But if they get 2 letters above that B period high, then they're not coming back for the low. We'll just chop probably all morning. So can they hold the momentum down? Kevin says, coming for the initial balance low. Stop should carry us to the overnight low. Fingers crossed. No need to cross your fingers. You've got the statistical probabilities in your favor. I just hate when we're stuck in these bot shenanigan zones. We know they're going to grind and grind and grind on Friday's low, getting as many people long and short as they can first before they make their move. Scooball says, in my opinion, there are a lot of stops below 4,500, and the market behavior there will tell us what will happen after. So he's basically implying once we get below that overnight low, we'll get a little pop lower, a little liquidation, because there'll be a bunch of stops waiting there. But then what happens next will tell us what's going to happen for the rest of the day. If we liquidate and then we pull right back up, we might be going nowhere. But if we get new sellers, they're going to want to take the market to the next week reference. The next week reference is 44.94. So essentially the way we would think about it, again, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because we might just look below and fail, right? There's 2 different ways the market can balance off this excess that it created. This is the excess, okay? So there's two different ways we can balance that off. We can go sideways at higher prices up here, maybe for days and days, maybe all week long. Who knows, right? Or we could pull back with price. We could pull back to test the previous balance area. We could pull back to backfill single prints. We could pull back to repair the weakness we left behind on the 28th, right? We don't know how far, but what happens at the overnight low will tell us, are we balancing with time or are we balancing with price? New sellers down there tell us we're balancing with price. So then we begin the process of what we call monitoring for continuation. So if we get below the overnight low and we get new sellers, we look to test the first week reference at 94. Now the market could turn around and head back up from there. Maybe that's all they need. Maybe there'll be dip buyers to buy that dip. We don't know. But if there's not, if there's new selling there, we look to backfill the single prints. Okay? Maybe that's all the market needs to turn around and head back up. Maybe there'll be dip buyers there. But if not, we look to test the balance area high. Maybe that's all we need. If not, the single prints is there. If not, the single, and we just keep letting it go down as far as it's got to go until it's ready to bring in the buyers and turn around and head back up. It's hard to predict how far it's going to go. But we can recognize what's happening at each important reference and use it to carry forward. There you go. Another poor low. The shenanigans continue. So again, we're looking for that push away to come back and repair, just like it did in the B period. By the way, if anybody's looking for more information to try to understand what I'm talking about here, this is called the two-way auction process. Much like the way an auctioneer at an art auction causes people to want to buy and sell, the excitement of that, we got 25, we got 30, 35, we got 40, 45 today, that excitement that builds from the auction forces people to pay more money than they really should pay for a thing. The stock market does the same thing all day, every day. And so that's what we're monitoring. How is that auction process going? As we keep pushing lower, do we keep convincing more people to sell? Do we run out of people? So on and so forth. If you're interested in learning more, there's a link in the top of the chat, pinned at the top. For my market profile e-course, it will explain everything for the low cost of just a couple of points on the ES. Falcon 1 says, what do you think about technical analysis? I've used it every day of my life. In my opinion, and this is just everyone's different, right? Just in my opinion, technical analysis is far more useful for day trading than, trading off of fundamentals. 7-7. Can you take a look at Bitchy? What's that? I assume you mean Bitcoin. Yeah, Bitcoin's not looking good. Ugh. Yeah, no. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. They're trying so desperately hard to hold 25,270. If that breaks, back down to 2,200. And so you might say, well, Charles, this is like a balance area. You know what I mean? Shouldn't we be buying right now at 25.6 with our stop below to target heading back up to the high? Yeah, you could, but how do you do that when you've got these type of candles happening over and over again? This is just all emotion and manipulation. So sure, you could try to go long in here, but there's just no way to know whether the trade will work or not. One random headline and the whole thing comes crashing down, you know? Scott says not one Bitcoin. Yeah, it's not the size of the trade. It's the uncertainty in terms of probabilities. Keith says, I studied finance 20 years ago and learned very little, if anything, about technical analysis. Crazy, really. Hopefully they have gotten with the times. Yeah, I think most economists at least look at TA these days. And the thing is, what you have to understand is the market doesn't move the way it used to. It used to move. I mean, if we're talking about 20 years ago, it was mostly fundamentals that were motivating the market because the market was mostly humans deciding to buy or sell things. But now it's totally different. Now the liquidity in the options market has just messed everything up because the option sellers, those market makers, hedge their positions, and everything runs off of technical analysis because it's all being operated by computers, you know? So even if your economist tells someone at a hedge fund, we think the market's going to pull back over the next 3 months or something because of they're still going to use technical analysis to choose where to put in their orders. So yeah, I should hope they're teaching it now. Scooball is saying this support doesn't look strong. It looks weak. It's too exact. I agree. We know why they make poor lows. Because they want to create liquidity below. We know why they grind and grind and grind on Friday's low to get as many traders long and as many traders short as they can. So I expect they will keep grinding and grinding and grinding. But as long as they stay below that B period high, they'll head down for that B period low. And that will bring in the new sellers. But we just got to sit back and let them grind as long as they need to. Can't change our narrative. Can't change our opinion. Nothing's changed. We just got to wait them out. Oh, you mean on BTC? Well, both markets. Uh, yeah, and on the narrative of the low for Bitcoin being weak, it's also especially weak because they had this balance area that they're grinding around in, right? Came back down to test that balance area low, and then they got good news, right? They got that good news that the what was it, the lawsuit against Grayscale or whatever. So they got some good news, and where did they get back to? The fucking middle of the balance area, increasing the odds the next test will be the one that breaks. Going downtown. Yes, more chop. Like I said, I'm happy to call it a trend as long as we're below that B period low. They just want to squeeze a few more people. All right, moment of truth for the sellers. They got to smack those ticks back down. Right, y'all. Pavel says NQ trading up. NQ new high of the day. Let's take a look. Yeah. So the NQ is not bearish, not anymore. But I'm not bullish. You know what I mean? Like I said, one of two things is happening today. We're either balancing with with time or with price. So the NQ is now telling us they're going to balance with time and not price. So I'd be looking for resistance at 15,590 or 580 and just sideways the rest of the day. Where you going? Nowhere. Seven says just press the green button. No, don't do that. No, my point is that there's so much the market would have to do to get me bullish today. So far it has to go. All the probabilities are that it wants to go sideways or lower. So far, NQ gave us the signal it wants to go sideways, but the ES is giving us the signal it wants to at least try to go lower. It wants to at least try to get below that overnight low and see if there's new sellers there. So my narrative remains the same. All of you that are switching between I'm bullish, I'm bearish, I'm neutral, I'm this, I'm that, that's what the market's doing. It's chopping around to convince you to get long, to get short, to get squeezed, and then eventually it'll make its break. And it'll just drop like a brick. At least on the ES anyway. Peter says market internals are pointing upward. Not the ones I'm looking at. NQ's been smacked down at the zero line every single time. Scooball says ES is giving chop signals, doing the weak reference. Yep, right now it's uncertain, but I am not uncertain. I still feel bearish. It's got to break one way or another. My guess is it's going to break lower. If it passes back through 45.15, I'll change my mind. I'll jump on board with the rest of you. But I got to see the market tell me that's what's happening first. That's all. Because right now I see value overlapping to lower. I see lower highs and lower lows. I see an extremely poor low. And I see that all the sideways chop has just been to squeeze traders one way and another. So every signal is telling me it wants to go lower. They haven't failed yet. Those ticks will be the first signal. If they can stay above the zero line, then I'll know I'm wrong. These days, you must just develop an understanding and stick with it until the market tells you something has changed. When the market tells you something has changed, when we get above that B period high, when those ticks hold the zero line, when some new information comes, then you change your mind. But otherwise, you're going to spend your life constantly being chopped up, constantly being confused. That's how the markets operate now. They grind and grind and grind for hours. Then they instantly make a move, 10 points, 20 points in less than a minute. And if you're not in it because you let them squeeze you out, well, you missed the opportunity. All right, here we go. The new tick will tell us, can they keep it above the zero line or does it come back below? Dun 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 dun. All right, there you go. Now I'm on board. Do you guys see that? Now we got above the B period high and they held the ticks. So now we can lose our bearish sentiment and look for the market to go sideways. So same as I said with the NQ, I'm not bullish by any means on the ES. I don't think it's going higher today. I do think we will probably head up and test this area around the overnight highs, 45.30s, and then just go sideways from there and probably spend the whole day chopping sideways. And then randomly at some point, we'll head down and repair that poor low and see if it brings in new selling. All right, so as always in a chop zone, we are watching the halfback to see if it can become support or resistance. So the halfback is at 45.1075. So when the market comes back down, if they hold that, we'll assume they're heading up to test the resistance around 24. If they break back through to test the support around 45.05, and we'll just assume they're going to keep chopping it up until they either repair the poor low and bring in new sellers, or they push through the resistance up here around the overnight high and bring in new buyers. Otherwise, a rotation is the highest probability for the rest of the day. Good times. Mudra says, if we don't look at the overnight activity, is there a look below and fail? Yes, there's a look below and fail. But what do you want for it? What do you expect for a look below and fail? Right? So let's go back and look at the daily. What has the market been doing? It's been trending. Right? Higher highs, higher lows, again and again, again and again, again and again, until yesterday, Friday, right? Then we finally made new lows. So do you think the market is going to create all this excess, have one little tiny bit of balance, and then turn around and keep going? It's not impossible. Again, I'm not saying that that's impossible that that could happen, but is that what you think is going to happen? Or do you think the higher probability is that the fact that we've run out of momentum to the upside means we will probably spend a few days going sideways before we can head up again? If that's the case, what can you do with the look below and fail other than look to target the previous day's high to come back down again for more resistance? Does that make sense? So right now, as far as I see it, I think we're going sideways today. Simple as that. Now, if we get above this level that I have marked up here as resistance, if the market pushes its way up there, it gets above that overnight high, it comes back down, it's finding support, I change. The market has chosen to use time to balance off the excess. So same thing for the NQ right here. They left behind that poor low. More weakness. Poor low from Friday and poor low from today in basically the exact same area. So same thing. I think they're just pushing up into pretty much right now, pushing up into the 15,580 area to get smacked right back down and go sideways. Now with the NQ, because it is one time framing to the upside, you could use cessation of the trend as a signal that it's going sideways. So you could wait for the D period to get all the way down below the C, or wait to print the E period and get below the D. But I do believe it's going to run out of steam and come back down any minute now. If they can push through this node up here around 15,580, come back down and turn it into support, well, then I'll change my mind. But until then, I'm looking for rotation. Okay, the ES is now technically one time framing to the upside. So same thing with the ES. If you want to wait to get below the C period low, you can do that, but I'm looking for resistance above. All right, so as we as we print the E period, the market is giving us an opportunity to have an understanding of what's going on here. Obviously, we're just chopping sideways, but we do technically have a trend because the D period broke the initial balance to the upside, not the downside. So if they can keep the E period low above 45.1050, which is what we call cessation of the trend or the end of the trend, they can take another push up for the highs. If the market pulls back down and gets cessation of the trend, that in my mind would be bearish to see. It would technically mean rotation. It would technically mean more sideways move. But with the poor low we left behind, getting cessation now will likely bring in some liquidation. And that liquidation can always bring in new selling. So I remain neutral. But if they can hold this D period low, there would be nothing wrong with looking for long trades for continuation to the upside, if that tickles your fancy. And they're holding it by a tick. Dun, 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 dun. The internals are neutral, not giving us anything. Hello, Laura. Good to see you. All right, so like I just said, technically now, based on market profile theory, the market is air quotes rotational, but I do believe we're going to start to get some liquidation and come back for that poor low. If we take out that poor low, we're right back where we were this morning. There's two options. We can either just test the overnight low and then pull right back up, in which case we will keep going sideways, or we can get new sellers, in which case it is bearish for continuation. So they're going to do it as sideways choppy as humanly possible. But I do believe they want to test that low. With that, I'm going to say goodbye here on the live stream and wish you all the best for the rest of the day. So I'm going to keep it that simple, right? You've got the low from today. It's poor. It's got a magnet that's pulling on it. Okay. The market is rotational, so it might just go sideways and sideways and sideways and sideways and then finally come for the low later. But I do believe the low is more likely to be tested than a breakout of the high. So I would feel much more comfortable shorting up near the highs for a rotation back to the POC. And I would not be interested in buying the lows for a rotation back up because they could liquidate the market there. So the market's going to go sideways inside today's range until it can test the poor low, and then we see what comes next. Any final questions for me before I say goodbye? Let me know in the chat. Mark says, I was waiting on the overnight low to break either way. Like you said, it was going sideways and I didn't want to risk my money. Yeah, it's a great point. So if you go back and watch in the first 5 minutes, what I said was the chop zone for this morning was the overnight low and the overnight high. So if you wanted to get into the trade a little sooner, you could look for it at yesterday's low. But if you wanted to be more conservative, just be more cautious, be more certain, you'd want to wait for that selling at the overnight low. So it is the same thing now. If we poke below there and we get that selling, you look for continuation because this was all just chop, essentially. Kevin says we have a poor high now. No, we have a good high, at least on the ES. Let me look on the NQ. Yep, no, good high on both markets. You could call the high on the NQ weak. Yeah, you could call it weak. But it's not technically poor because that's the overnight. Remember, we're including Monday's range as being part of the overnight. So it's not a poor high. It's not up against a previous day's high. So to me, both of those markets are good highs. I'd be happy to sell for a rotation back to the POC. But both those markets have poor lows. Food for thought. Scalping says, what price is the poor low? 45.02. And the overnight low is just below it at 4,500. Oh, man, I didn't even realize it was 4,500 to a tick. That's pretty weak. So, like I said, I don't know how long they're going to have to go sideways first. It may be a few hours, but they're coming for that low, in my opinion. All right, thank you very much, and we will see the members of the brigade tomorrow morning. Bye.